This podcast is the design of City Sites Urban Media, and our goal is to bring into focus the difference between culture and God's ideas found in His Word. To learn more, go to citysitesurbanmedia.com.
So the real issue is not only are they shutting me down, but they are using brute force to prevent other people from hearing a point of view that is basically not allowed on campuses.
What was your point of view? What was so outrageous that they shut you down?
Right. My outrageous point of view is that there is no government agency more dedicated to the proposition that Black lives matter than the police, and that the police have saved tens of thousands of minority males over the last 2 decades thanks to constitutional proactive policing.
College tuition should pay for probably the greatest experience any individual should have, which is to be able to learn, to be able to encounter works of extraordinary beauty and grandeur, wisdom, profundity. This is 4 years to open your mind to what human beings have accomplished, what they overcame. The poisonous politics of identity have taken over. The biggest problem faced by students today is the encouragement of victimology. Students are taught to look around their environment, which is one of opportunity, and see only hatred and bigotry. Students today are taught, if I'm a female, I should not be expected to read male writers. Or if I'm Black, I shouldn't be expected to read white writers. This color coding and gender coding is extraordinarily narrow. There is an entire bureaucracy that is dedicated to the preposterous idea that to be an American student on a college campus is to be the subject of literally life-threatening oppression. The color of one's skin or one's gender is the most important qualification, is now transforming the world.
This is the City Sites Podcast with Larry Kutzler.
The aftermath of George Floyd's death has called for the systems of policing to change. We are now seeing the federal and state governments looking closely at systems used by law enforcement around the country. Recently, another Black man was killed in Atlanta that led to the firing of the officer and the resignation of the police chief. Again, questions remain. Was it necessary to shoot a suspect as he ran away? There are lots of questions all of us have about law enforcement, about their training, about the law enforcement culture, and about culture at large. As you have heard me say repeatedly on this podcast, that anyone can collect knowledge, but few really have the wisdom to apply it. Today, I am hoping my conversation with my guest will bring a perspective of wisdom to the knowledge we know about racism. My guest today is Reverend Brian Walker, the program director of Pro-Life Action Ministries in St. Paul, Minnesota. Pro-Action Life Ministries is a direct action ministry focused on sidewalk counseling in front of abortion facilities. Brian and his wife Denise founded the Rich in Mercy Abortion and Miscarriage Recovery Program. Thanks for joining us. I've talked to many guests over the years, and today I have one of those guests that I really enjoy for a lot of different reasons. I love Brian's passion for what he does. He's in the pro-life movement, and I love the way he thinks and the way he brings about a different perspective on issues like what we're going to talk about today. So Brian Walker, you are a minister, correct? Mm-hmm. And you work with Pro-Life Action Ministries?
Yep, Pro-Life Action Ministries in St. Paul.
Tell us what you do.
Well, I'm the program director there. So anybody that knows a small nonprofit means that can mean anything. So I've built the ramp, our delivery ramp to the back of the building, all the way to running 40 Days for Life or producing our Good Friday service at Planned Parenthood. We had about 4,000 people out there the previous year. This year, because of COVID, we weren't allowed to pull a permit. And so I do 40 Days for Life. That is an international prayer movement, prayer, fasting, community outreach, and peaceful presence in front of abortion facilities. And I guess it culminated successfully with the closing of the abortion facility within Health Partners Regents Hospital back in 2011.
Well, you are facing probably the same kind of situation that the culture is right now. It's a tense situation. You know, women are coming in for abortion. You're standing there or giving a different perspective on what they're about to do. And so what have you learned? You know, you're not there to be violent. You're not angry at anyone, right? But you're there to present a case. So what has that taught you?
Well, I've been doing this for about 13 and a half years on the street. And what I've learned, in a lot of ways, it brings back memories because Denise and I are post-abortive too. And so when I'm out there, very often I see myself drive up. And so probably over 40 years ago in New York City, Denise and I decided to abort our firstborn. We were engaged, scheduled to be married in May. We got pregnant in January. People come up to have abortions for a variety of reasons. Most of them have nothing to do with the abortion as a political issue, abortion as a cultural issue. They come there because they are in panic. They are there because they're hopeless. They're there because they don't have an alternative. It doesn't mean those things don't exist. It's just that you don't think straight when you are pregnant. And women keep telling us over and over again, I have nobody to help me. I have children at home. I'm out of work. And so the answer to that very often could easily be the people that are standing away from these sidewalks saying, well, she needs a job, she needs fewer children, and she needs a future. And so that kind of gets into a whole nother thing, whereas if she had more services and more opportunities, she wouldn't be here at the abortuary. Well, I've seen everything from $60,000 Escalades to women getting off public transit that come in for abortions. We've had occasions where we deal with sex traffickers and pimps. I've seen 2 pastors by word of knowledge, 1 pastor I knew, bringing somebody in to have an abortion. So it goes all over the gamut, across cultural and across economic lines, even though people of color have abortions inordinately higher than their numbers in the population. So over the years, I've learned to extend the gospel. Many people intuitively think, well, you're focusing on the child. No, you focus on the woman because she's there. She feels abandoned. She feels she has no way out. And we focus on her immediate needs. So we often direct them to a pregnancy help center to get an alternative to killing their own child. And I tell people, don't bring the final solution to a temporary problem, no matter how devastating, how intense the temporary problem is. The final solution is the final solution. You're killing a human being made in the image of God.
You've just given us a good summary of good tactics, maybe, in dealing with a very controversial subject. So let's change the tone here a little bit, or direction, and talk about racism. It has been my feeling, Brian, that we as Americans own this problem. It's not the white issue, it's not the black issue, it's not the police, it's all of us. We're Americans, and Americans have a problem, so we all own it. So where do we go? How do you perceive where we are as a culture? And as you have said, this is how we deal with the abortion issue. How would you deal with the race issue?
This is how I deal with it. I try to have the mind of Christ toward it. The woman at the well, the book of Acts, the Ethiopian eunuch. All these examples are people that are communicating and talking with each other. The Ethiopian eunuch ran up to the chariot to get an explanation that he wasn't given the hand. Candace, she wasn't given the hand. She came from Ethiopia. Very different person from geographically, culturally, probably color-wise. The book of Acts, people speaking in different tongues, people there represented from different nations. My wife went to Israel last year. She was surprised about the ethnic diversity, even amongst the Jews, Jews from Ethiopia, Jews from the Sudan, Jews from Yemen, Jews from Russia, Jews from the continent of Europe, the mixture of races. America, where we are right now. I'm thinking that because of the Antifa, the alt-rights, elements of certain of the Black Lives Movement, certain elements of that, it's becoming a perfect storm. And if you think the imagery of somebody reporting a hurricane or a tornado, you could barely hear them. You have to hold the mic a lot closer. And there's anger, there is turmoil, there's turbulence around them, and they have to shout to be heard. And that's what I feel now. Everything is like a perfect storm. We have folks who look like me, Black, African American, and we have our issues. We have issues that have been thrusted on us. We have issues that we've had that are what I call in-home, in-house family talk. And this has been festering for a long time. And so I tell people, I have an expression, this tinder's been in the forest for a long time. And Mr. Floyd and other police brutalities and or murders have lit the fuse. And so now people are angry, people are venting, people are choosing sides. And when I look at the woman at the well, and I look at the book of Acts, and when I look at the other encounters where Jesus encountered people who would normally be angry at him, at odds with him, he always asked questions. And so the controversy now is like, white folks, you need to shut up and you need to listen. And there's a certain truth to that for anybody. And so if I'm going to tell white folks to listen, then they also have to listen to me. And it has to be a two-way street. Because of the anger now, the traffic is mostly flowing one way. You listen to me.
That's right. That's right.
And if you don't want to listen to me, I'm going to make assumptions about how you feel about me. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to make further assumptions about what you feel about me, that you're a racist, that you're prejudiced, if you're not anti-racist. And I was listening to NPR on the way over here. Had an interesting discussion, I forget the name of the author, and he has a book about a racism that's, I guess, returning to the bestseller on New York Times. And his premise is that whites feel that they're not racist because their paradigm or their definition of racism goes back to Jim Crow, back to the voting codes, the race codes, the lunch counters, the public accommodations. That's viewed as racism. And so for the most part, those things, glory to God, have been taken away. But if blacks are perceived as being different, threatening, ungrateful, lazy, not taking opportunities, then he was saying that that's a form of racism too. So you may not say that, but it's an omission. It's something that you feel, but you're not going to express for whatever reason that it is. And he talked about it in schools. He said it's wrong to think of a achievement gap. He says that's in a way a racist paradigm. It's not about achievement. It's about an opportunity gap or resource gap. I taught on the north side. First day I was in the library at Franklin Elementary, and my thought was, well, where are the books? There were very little books in the library, and I asked them, where are the books? And they said, oh, the kids tear them up or steal them, and we just haven't bothered to restock them. And I was also told, don't do Father's Day. I taught art. Don't do Father's Day cards and don't assign homework. And I said, what do you mean don't assign homework? They said, well, the kids won't do it anyway. They'll get angry at you, and we don't assign homework. Now, praise be to God, we had a good Christian principal at Franklin that has totally turned things around. I visited probably about 1.5 years, 2 ago, just kind of walking through the school. I said, I used to teach here, kind of walk through, night and day. Even though she is working in a secular setting, I know by her attitude and her practice, she brought the gospel, she brought hope to that school, and that made the difference. That was the resource that she brought at that time. I'm sure that the library has been restocked. I'm sure a lot of things have been done. But if we don't listen and talk to each other and stop talking past each other, nothing will get done.
You know, we can't be going into culture or have these conversations with blinders. But I want you to listen to a conversation that Mike Wallace had with Morgan Freeman a number of years ago. And to me, I just want to get your take on it because it's an interesting dialogue between the two.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? Oh, no, come on, tell me.
I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
Okay, Brian, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't know if Morgan Freeman even thinks that anymore, or if he does, he would even have the freedom to express it. But that being said, he was saying basically, I don't believe in Black History Month or Negro History Month, as it was originally called. He said, we're Americans. Now, that thought, that expression would not get 10 seconds out the door today, because he would be considered an Uncle Tom or out of reality or a race denier. We're not all Americans. He would be called out, just like a lot of blacks or whites are called out today. They're making a statement like that. He'd be considered an absurd statement. But what I think he was saying and getting at was that I don't want to have my culture isolated by designating a month of its history, because that isolates us even more. It takes me out of the mainstream, not so much that the mainstream is a homogenization of how we should think and how we should act and how we should look in our cultures and all that type of stuff. He felt it further isolated. He says we don't have cultural months for other ethnic groups. You don't have cultural months for some ethnic groups. I mean, you have Irish American Month and others that don't have the prominence that Black History Month has. And I thought about that. And in some ways I agree with him, in some ways I don't. I have no problem with it, because otherwise our culture and our history probably would never be known if it wasn't for Black History Month. And I've used it as a way to teach our own kids at home. My wife and I, my wife homeschooled for a while. And so we taught them about their history. And Northside schools, these children are taught about their history. I think the movie Hidden Figures is a great Black history film. The Bee by Oprah Winfrey. I think that was about a black school and these group of black students who advanced through the National Spelling Bee. That was a great movie about Black history. Women and men who went through hardship were dealt a bad deck, but perceived through anyway. And so those are good examples of Black history. But if it's going to be a Black history which says that, puts the hand to other groups and you have no say, you can't comment on this, you have no comment in the game, I'm not going to say skin in the game, you have no comment in the game and don't have a right to weigh in on this, that's wrong. It further isolates us. It gets, I think, the bridges, it cuts the bridges off that we could really talk to each other.
Well, I think it's true that it's important for culture to be known individually, but it shouldn't put us against one another, which it's being done. Brian, you're going to have to come back, and we're going to have to do this again next week. But before you go, I think you and I both would agree that our thinking has to change. I mean, that's where it has to begin, not in the legislature or in the city council. It has to begin in us. And so I'm going to quote or read from Romans 12:2, because I think it's very important for people of faith to think differently about issues, including race. It says this: "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think." Now think about that for a moment and tell me what that says to you, especially as it relates to the race.
The Word says we should have the mind of Christ. And we know the mind of Christ not only by His Word, but also by His action. How did He deal with people who were cultural outcasts at that time? And I always think that the woman at the well is probably the best example. Women at those times were not considered, they were considered property. Samaritan, person from a different tribe, culture, politic. She was an adulterer, number 5, And so she was an outcast. She was at the well at the wrong time of the day. Things like cultural nuances that we kind of miss here as Westerners. And he spoke to her. He took the time to talk to her. I don't think enough people take the time to talk to somebody over the fence. We'd like to talk to somebody maybe over the internet or via other third-party media. As you walk around your neighborhood and you see people of different color or different race, and you could say, "Excuse me, I'm Brian, and I have a somewhat of a personal question for you." Most people will be kind of guarded, but they'll say, "Well, okay. You're of a different race. What do you think about things that are going?" And have an ear to hear. The Word is very clear. Faith comes by hearing. And the faith comes by hearing, and that is the most paramount thing. How much, just a little less, that information and connection and relationship comes by hearing as well. And so I think that asking people to listen, regardless of what side you're on, it should not be a problem. And people should not get defensive about being asked to listen. But if it's you're being asked to listen to agree, and it's not about clarity or it's not about just expressing yourself, then we're not really serving that real well.
Next week, Brian, we're going to talk about some of the rebuilding process, what that looks like, especially as we can continue to dialogue into the question, what do we do about race here in America and in our community? So thanks for coming in.
The liberals frequently get angry with me when they're talking about racism. And I say, real racism is when you look at me and you look at the color of my skin and you determine what I'm supposed to think. And if I don't think that, you start calling me names. That's real racism.
Right.
Thank you for joining us today. Every Friday, we bring you this podcast with interviews with people who are challenging the status quo of Christianity and challenging the cultural norms of our day. Please help us get the word out by sharing the link to this podcast with your online friends and family. Our website also contains other podcasters who are part of the City Sites network of communicators, all sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Our website is citysitesurbanmedia.com.
This is the City Sites Podcast Network.